marble lady. His love, he said, was everlasting and undying.
But 40 years later, when he heard of her death, Shaw wrote, everyone is greatly relieved. Herself, I should think, most of all, for she could not live with real people in the real world. Still, she was a great enchantress, and she enchanted me among the rest. This is the story of that enchantment
told in their own words, in the hundreds of letters they sent to one another over the years.
Letters they both saved,
fought over,
returned to one another, and very nearly lost in the Second World War. But it is 40 years earlier that our play begins. Imagine, if you will, the end of the last century. Victoria is still on the throne. England, the most modern of modern nations. The world wars are still to come.
Mrs. Patrick Campbell is at the height of her career. With Ellen Terry, she had reigned over the English theatre for nearly 10 years. She had already created many of her most famous roles.
But her most famous,
Eliza Doolittle, was yet to come.
For we now speak in the words of George Bernard Shaw.
And Mrs. Patrick Campbell.
I was just ending my first career as a music and drama critic and beginning to turn out plays of my own, none of them achieving much success at first. Inspired by the beauty and artistry of Mrs. Patrick Campbell in the second Mrs. Tanqueray, I started work on a new play, Caesar and Cleopatra, hoping that she might work in it when it was finished. And with this in mind, I invited her down to my cottage in Hindhead for a weekend visit.
But it is all here in the letters. Will you begin, please, Mr. Shah?
Mr. Shaw.
Mr. Shaw.
With pleasure, Mrs. Campbell. And that merry episode was the end, except for making dust of the bone scraps and scattering them on a flower bed. O grave, where is thy victory? And so good night, friend, who understands about one's mother and other things.